I wanted to share something I felt like the Lord gave me this week for us. We're back in Colossians chapter 4. If you have your Bibles, we're going to look at verses 5 and 6. We've been studying the book of Colossians. We know Colossians is written to a young culture. The Colossian church at the time Paul's writing, it's probably potentially a little older than we are now. But Paul's coaching them up in what I think has become one of the most important ideas in my life in the last couple of years is he's really teaching them what it looks like to live in the divine nature. I would love to say something I think is important for us, and that is you can study the scriptures to know the principles of the King. But the divine nature does not really begin to superimpose upon us until we start spending time face to face with him. And there's way too many people in the kingdom that want to believe that they can have the divine nature just by living the scriptures. I love the scriptures. I think the scriptures are vital and important. But we have to be a people that go face to face with him. Paul talks here in Colossians 4. He makes a statement that says, live wisely among those who are not Christians and make the most of every opportunity. Live wisely among those who are not Christians and make the most of every opportunity. This phrase, live wisely. So right now we have to understand what Paul's saying to the Colossians, we can apply to ourselves. And it talks about our life out in the marketplace. It talks about the way we live and handle ourselves in front of people. The word live wisely here, the phrase honestly means be smart. Be smart about how you live around those who are not Christians. The Greek word here is Sophia, and it is used to mean intelligence and thought. It can be both from spiritual and human sources. So what this phrase means is be thoughtful or thought-filled about what you're doing. So it's a mandate to intentional living. It means we are not to just be random, not to be people that just go through life and react. What Paul's saying here is believers, we are to be intentional about how we live. And he says the place he wants to highlight the most is I want you to be intentional about how you live around those who aren't believers. What he's really teaching us is this. He's teaching this Colossian church that their lives are silently witnessing to something. To the people watching them, their lives are a silent witness. Have you thought about that? Your life, my life, is a silent witness. How many grew up in a church culture of some level that was always talking about witnessing to people? One of my favorite quotes is, preach the gospel at all times, when necessary, use words. This is the principle that Paul's talking about here. Because the goal is that the way we live in front of the world around us, in front of the lost, in front of those we work with, and those who don't know Jesus, the way we live in front of them is intended to open doors for him in their life. I want you to think about John 3. How many know John 3:16? You could quote it. Okay, so let's talk about it. For God so in love with humanity sent his only son. Because his goal of that was that none would perish, but that all of humanity would find eternal life. So we know that from John 3, in the heart of the King, in the heart of our Father is this passion for people. The Greek word here for live, the word means to conduct. It actually speaks not just to a moment, but it speaks to the holistic life pattern. So Paul's saying with all of your life, every aspect, it's a circumference word. So it means to kind of look all the way around your life. In every aspect of your life, conduct yourself. What I see in that's important is what Paul's really saying is it's not those big moments that you had that God encounter with somebody. It's actually your micro moments of your everyday life that is really going to witness and open doors to them. Think about that. Every day, our lives are filled with opportunities for the world around us to encounter the King just by the way we live. What do you mean? By the way we drive, by the way we handle ourselves in the grocery store, by the way we react in the midst of conflict, by the way we love our children, by the way we love our spouses, by the way we honor authority. All of these micro moments throughout the day are actually a silent witness to the world around us about the King. Perspective is what Paul's talking about. That we live with perspective. And I think perspective is eroding in our day. We tend to get caught up in the moment. We get sucked into a moment and we miss this understanding. I can't get sucked into a moment and react and get out of line because my life is a living witness to the world around me. So I have this is what Paul's saying to them. I want you to live wisely. I want you to pay attention to the micro moments of your life because of the cause of the unsaved. Because they're watching. We tend to lose the big picture. Can I submit a thought? I actually think it's a truth. It's not a thought. Your Father in heaven is sovereign. How many would agree with that? How many don't understand what sovereign means? Okay, sovereign. Sovereign means he's fully in control. Start to finish. So, take that thought, take that logic idea of if he's fully in control of everything, then where I am right now in my life, my current position, my current status, my current placement in life is by his design. You are where you are right now in your life by his agenda. And if you and I would submit to that principle and understand that truth, regardless of our delight or our disgust in where we're at, we would become powerful assets for him. Because we realize that he's placed us where he's placed us for a reason, and that reason is it is his agenda to reveal himself through us. That there are people in those micro moments that we are going to impact with the way we follow him. And so we have to be a people that put aside complaining and our agitation with where we're at and just recognize I am where I am because you placed me there and I trust you because I know you're fully in control. I may not like it, that's okay. It's okay not to like it. It's not okay to not live wisely in that moment. Obedience should never be based on our enjoyment of a situation. Should be based on our submission to his authority. For this phrase, not Christians, Paul uses the term outsiders in the Greek, and it made me ask a question. What does it mean to actually be on the inside? If we understand that there's outsiders in the kingdom, what's it actually mean to be an insider? Does it just mean that we're people that believe in the cross? Does it mean that we're religiously affiliated with Christianity? I think the simplest way, if we study the scriptures, to understand what it actually means to be in the family of God is to be people that are surrendered to Jesus, his way, and his teachings. Jesus makes a statement in the New Testament that's important for us, that to those who love me will what? Obey me, keep my commandments. So being an insider in the kingdom is not about a belief set. Being an insider is about being fully under the control of your king. I think we have to be willing to look at this in our culture and say, some of us don't like where the king has put us, and so we find the freedom to complain against it, to murmur against it, instead of just submitting ourselves, surrendering and saying, I trust you, you're the boss, I'll be where you want me to be. And if we live surrendered like this, our lives become a living opportunity that he can use every moment, every situation, every obstacle. I'm talking about work. I'm talking about school. I'm talking about your neighborhood. I'm saying every single moment of your life, if I could just challenge us to understand he is in it for a reason. and he's using it. Paul will go on and he kind of shifts gears and he says, let your conversation, so he says, live wisely in front of the lost. And then the next thing he says is, let your conversation be gracious and effective so that you'll have the right answer for everyone. And I think he does this because it's probably the one place we most commonly undermine the purpose of the king. It's with our mouths. It's with what we say. Let your conversation be gracious and effective so that you will have the right answers. The word for conversation here is logos, and it means anything spoken. It specifically is the words uttered by a living being. So we have to understand this phrase that Paul says as everything we say. So let me say it differently. Let everything you say be gracious and effective. The word for gracious here, oops, I just spilled my coffee. The word for gracious here is charis. It's a word with a really broad definition. If we're going to understand what Paul's really saying here, what he's getting at is, let the words you say cause those around you to thrive. It's the idea of being intentional with what we say so that it will cause a thriving in those who hear what we say. Paul goes, in the Greek, in the New Living, it doesn't come through, but in the Greek, Paul highlights this idea. He says, as though seasoned with salt, which is a really interesting term. He says, let what you say be gracious as if it was seasoned with salt. It's a cooking term, right? How many cook? How many love to cook? That's like my favorite place in the world. Put me in the kitchen. Let me just de-stress. I'll cook. Somewhere inside of me is an Italian grandma that just loves to cook and loves to feed people. When I was learning to cook, the first thing that I had to understand was the power of salt. How many have oversalted something? And you recognize the moment you oversalt it, it's impossible to get it back. It is a gone meal. You got to throw it away. You got to cut your losses. It's awful. Paul says, as though seasoned with salt. The idea is to make it palatable because salt is used to make things taste better. So Paul says, I want your speech, everything you say, all the time, I want you to say it in a way that it's palatable. It's easy for those around you to understand, to digest. I would say it this way, what he's driving at is, I want others to want to hear your words. How many have been around somebody when they talk, what's going on in your head is, I just wish they'd stop, I just wish they'd stop, I just wish they'd stop. You see, Paul says to believers, to all of us, here's your challenge. I want you to learn to speak, conversate, talk with people. Which people? All people. There's something more in this that I want us to understand. If the idea is to make what we say palatable, what it's really calling us is to remove any thoughtless speech from our communication. Because the idea is to prepare your speech. How many are reactive by nature? You tend to fly off the handle a bit, and you know those words when they go out, you're trying to grab them and you realize they're already out, it's too late. That's what Paul's saying to put a death to, that we are to be governed people. James will say it this way, this little thing in our mouth starts a lot of fires. And it's a repeating idea in the New Testament that one of the places that we most commonly undermine our witness is with our mouth. I would say it this way. We no longer, after reading this text and listening to what it really means, we no longer have the right to speak without thinking. And I'd say more than that, we no longer have the right before Jesus to speak without purposeful intentionality to build people up. We are to be builders, is what Paul is saying. That what your speech is supposed to do is build people around you. Some of us are gifted with destructive speech. We're really good at tearing down. And Paul says that is not to be named among us anymore. We as a people before God are to be those that build with our speech. Ugliness, crassness, harshness. I don't know how to read this text and not say this. They are to be forever banished from our communication. We are to be gatekeepers of our mouths and say, Jesus has asked me to be unwilling to say that stuff. How many are like me and you hear these one-liners in your head that you just know you're not supposed to let out, but man, they're good? You're like, man, I got something to say right now, and it would just be quick and tidy. See, where to put that down, where to lay that aside. Paul uses a word here for everyone, and the word means everyone. It doesn't mean the church. It doesn't mean your family. It honestly means the entire anthropos, the world around us. So you and I are without there's no place where we're allowed to be harsh, crass. We are to be builders. I want us to consider the weight of this. And I'd love to ask us to be people that lay down the need to say what we think, to have an opinion, and exchange it for the government of Jesus, to where we say, if I can't build, I will not speak. But you see, Paul actually doesn't say, then go silent. Paul just said, make sure the only things you say. So I actually think there's a calling to become people that build. And I'd love to say this. There's only one place in your life that you are allowed to have unfiltered communication, and that's alone with the Lord in the secret place. You can say whatever you want before Him. Give Him all kinds of room to edit you. I don't want to show Him that part of me. He already knows it's there. But outside of that place, we are to filter our communication through Him. We are to speak as though it was Jesus speaking. That is what it means to put on the divine nature. It won't come out of my mouth unless it would come out of His, because I am a representative of Him to all men. Let's stand.